Tari stood at the threshold of the grand entrance hall, her lungs tight with anticipation. She had never seen such polished marble, so cold and reflective that it was almost like a cruel mirror daring her to see herself differently. Standing behind her was the housemaid, a kindly older woman with kind eyes and trembling hands. She offered Tari a piece of paper. The heading read, "House Expectations." The maid's voice trembled as she spoke. "Mr. Daimeji asked me to give this to you. Please read carefully." Tari's heart sank a little. She was far from home, far from the warmth of her late parents' modest hut. The shine and splendor that surrounded her now felt sterile. She could smell money in the air, the kind of wealth that made old furniture vanish overnight to be replaced by the newest trends. With a steadying breath, she read the first item on the list. 1. No speaking unless spoken to. 2. No leaving the property without explicit permission. 3. No entering the east wing under any circumstances. She glanced at the maid, searching for comfort, and asked softly, Is that all?" The maid's eyes flicked to a security camera perched high in a corner of the ceiling. "Please," she whispered, almost pleading. "Don't ask questions, Mississippi." The finality in her tone made Tari press her lips together. Fear pricked her heart, but a flicker of stubborn resolve lit within her. She was no stranger to hardship. If Daimeji thought this piece of paper would break her spirit, he knew nothing of the young woman who had learned resilience under a scorching village sun. Walking with measured steps, she followed the maid down a corridor that seemed endless, lined with statues of Greek gods, each casting an eerie shadow across the polished floor. She could feel eyes on her, whether literal or figurative, she wasn't sure, but she sensed an ominous presence. Perhaps it was the silent hush of money, or maybe it was the intangible aura of Daimeji himself, the man who had ordered her presence here as his new bride. Reaching a massive wooden door at the corridor's end, the maid paused. "This is your room. Mr. Daimeji said you should rest." She lowered her voice, adding, "The staff quarters are on the ground floor if you need anything." Tari nodded, stepping inside. The door closed softly behind her. The plush carpet muffled her footsteps as she walked to a large mirror framed in carved gold. She held the rule sheet against her chest, reading it again, 3 simple lines that felt more like cold bars of a cage. Yet somewhere in her mind, she promised herself, "I will not be caged." A week later, Tari stood under a gazebo draped with silk and fresh white lilies. The entire setup had been orchestrated by Daimeji's grandmother, Ma Abani, a revered matriarch whose cunning eyes seemed to always be calculating. The ceremony was an odd combination of lavishness and emptiness. Over 100 guests had come, yet there was no sign of celebration or genuine happiness. Tari wore a simple white gown that clung awkwardly to her slender figure. She kept her eyes down, scanning the embroidered hem, searching for courage. Opposite her stood Daimeji, tall and impeccably dressed in a tailored black suit, like a statue carved from expensive marble. He did not meet her gaze, not even once. His face was set, composed. His lips pressed tight in a thin line that betrayed no emotion. A priest read the vows, but Daimeji's voice was chillingly flat when he spoke. "I do." That was it. No softness. No tenderness. Just 2 syllables to seal a fate that felt more like a transaction than a union. The cameras clicked, capturing forced smiles from both families. After the ceremony, waiters drifted through the crowd, offering champagne and exotic finger foods. Tari looked around, half expecting someone to toast the newlyweds, but the atmosphere was tense and quiet. There was no father of the bride to beam with pride, no mother to fuss over her daughter's veil. Daimeji's father had died years ago, and Ma Abani sat regally in her chair, occasionally nodding to the guests as though she were granting them permission to celebrate. Tari's only ally in that moment was her cousin Muna, who had journeyed from the city to represent Tari's side of the family. Muna approached with a gentle hand on Tari's shoulder. "Sister, I know this isn't the wedding you dreamed of," she said softly, ignoring the rule that Tari shouldn't speak unless spoken to, "but you will make the best of it, won't you?" Tari nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. "I have no choice," she whispered. Her voice shook, but she forced herself to speak. "They're all strangers, Muna. Even my husband." Muna gave a sympathetic nod, her modern city ways shining through in her posture and fearless expression. "Find a way to survive. You are strong. You always have been." Before Tari could respond, Daimeji's cold gaze flitted to them, prompting Muna to step away. Tari felt as though she were losing the last anchor of comfort she had. Surrounded by a sea of expensive suits and muted conversation, she stood with her new husband, who refused to even look at her. The first day of her married life was as silent as the lonely wind through an abandoned alley, where echoes of hope faded before they could become words. When Tari moved into Daimeji's mansion, she was given a bedroom in a secluded wing. The first morning after the wedding, she woke to see the typed rule sheet taped to the vanity mirror across from her bed. It felt like a threat. The bold black letters glared back at her. She remembered reading them until they were etched into her brain. 1. No speaking unless spoken to. 2. No leaving the property without explicit permission. 3. No entering the East Wing under any circumstances. But there was a rebellious spark in Tari. Taking a small pen from the bedside table, she walked up to the mirror. Her reflection looked back at her, a slim young woman with dark hair braided neatly, brown eyes that held a quiet defiance. She carefully drew a small X over the word no in the first rule. Now it read, "Speaking unless spoken to." A private joke, a tiny act of rebellion no one else would see. But it gave her a thrill of momentary power. She touched the glass, feeling her fingertips grow cold against the reflective surface. "I am not a prisoner," she told her reflection in a hushed tone. "I am just tested." Somewhere above her, a floorboard creaked. She glanced up, half expecting Daimeji to appear, stern-faced and unrelenting. But the noise faded. Tari exhaled, heart pounding with the excitement of her small disobedience. She knew she would have to pick her battles carefully. Later, she ventured downstairs for breakfast. The dining table stretched far, set with gleaming silverware and white porcelain plates that looked untouched. Daimeji was nowhere to be found, but she felt the watchful eyes of the staff. The cook, an older man with flecks of gray in his hair, shuffled over. "Are you hungry, madam?" She hesitated. "Yes. Thank you." She deliberately chose her words, remembering the rule forbidding her from speaking unless addressed. The cook nodded and retreated to the kitchen. In the silence, Tari felt the presence of the rules swirling around her, threatening to close in. Returning to her room with a tray of food, she carefully pinned the rule sheet to the mirror. Every day, she promised herself, she would cross out another word or phrase. It was her way of reclaiming her voice. She didn't know how long this small act of rebellion could remain hidden, but for now, it was all she had. Time passed slowly in the mansion. Days blurred into nights, each moment carrying a sense of stifled quiet. Daimeji remained distant, often gone before Tari woke up. She would see him in fleeting moments, his tall frame emerging from a study or crossing the living room on his way out. Their eyes might meet, but he never paused long enough for her to initiate conversation. One night, as thunder rumbled across the sky, Tari walked the length of the second-floor corridor. She wasn't even sure why she did it, except that the suffocating atmosphere of her room was becoming too much. The hallway was lined with portraits of stern-faced ancestors, each set in elaborate gold frames. The shadows cast by the hallway lamps made it feel as though the paintings were alive, silently judging her. That was when she heard it, a soft, mournful strain of violin music. It drifted from somewhere down the hallway, echoing off the high ceilings. The melody was both haunting and comforting, resonating with a quiet ache that tugged at her heart. She followed the sound until she reached a door, painted a deep, rich mahogany. Her hand trembled on the brass doorknob. Then she saw the tiny plaque above it, East Wing, Private. Her pulse quickened. This door was part of the rule she should not break. She remembered the typed line, "No entering the East Wing under any circumstances." But the music on the other side was so tempting, like a lonely soul calling out to her. Cautiously, she tried the doorknob. It was locked. The violin's lament threaded through the gap beneath the door, making her heart yearn to open it. She leaned her head against the door and whispered, "Who are you?" She got no answer beyond the music that continued, piercing and sad. A surge of curiosity and empathy overcame her, but she knew better than to rattle the handle or cause a scene. She hurried back to her room, that melody etched into her mind. She whispered it to herself, softly humming the tune. Though she didn't have the key to the East Wing, she had a clue to the hidden soul within it. The next day, when the haunting tune still lingered in her ears, she vowed that she would find out who, or what, lay behind that forbidden door. It became routine for Tari to note Daimeji's mysterious schedule. He disappeared every evening at exactly 10 o'clock. He would stand from wherever he was, whether reading a newspaper in the library or flipping through documents in his study, glance at his phone, then stride away with purposeful steps. Curiosity gnawed at Tari. Sometimes she would follow at a distance, being careful not to be noticed. One night, while trailing him along a dimly lit corridor, Tari overheard a guard talking to another staff member in a low voice. "He's off to his third room now," the guard said. "Best not disturb him." Tari instinctively stepped back into the shadows, waiting for Daimeji to vanish around the corner. The notion of a third room baffled her. She knew of his bedroom, his study, and various offices and lounges, but something about the guard's tone suggested this third room was private, special. Or possibly secret. She continued her midnight exploration for another week, each night inching closer to understanding. Eventually, she managed to catch a glimpse. Daimeji would unlock a small door near the back staircase leading to an upper floor, then lock it behind him. This stairwell presumably led to an attic or a hidden space in the sprawling mansion. The glimpses she caught made her stomach churn with both fear and longing to know the truth. One evening, she summoned the courage to speak to the cook in the kitchen after dinner. "Is there a special place that Mr. Daimeji goes to at night?" she asked, her voice trembling despite her effort to sound calm. The cook blinked, then lowered his gaze. "If you know what's good for you," he replied, "you won't try to find out." Despite the warning, her interest flared brighter. In her village, she had grown up with stories of hidden rooms, ghosts, and secrets. But this was different. Something about Daimeji's nightly retreat felt deeply personal, maybe even a source of his power or his pain. That night, Tari paused outside her bedroom door, clutching the rule sheet that was now riddled with crossed-out words. She locked eyes with her reflection in the mirror. No speaking unless spoken to was nearly gone, replaced by scribbles that read, "Speak, speak, speak." She gave herself a small, resolute nod. She would find a way into that third room. And perhaps uncover a piece of Daimeji's guarded heart in the process. Tari's interactions with the staff were often carefully orchestrated glimpses. They wouldn't chat openly with her, they were clearly afraid of crossing some unspoken boundary with their employer. But she sensed kindness in them, especially in the cook. He was a rotund man with a warm, fatherly presence. Every time she picked up a meal, he would smile gently, but never engage in small talk. One morning, as she returned her breakfast tray, she found a tiny slip of paper tucked beneath the napkin. Her heart thumped. Carefully unfolding the paper, she read, "He's not evil. He's just broken. But don't get too close." The words were hurried, the handwriting shaky, but the meaning was stark. Tari carefully tucked the note into the pocket of her dress. She glanced around, seeing no one but the cook stirring a pot of soup at the far end of the kitchen. She cleared her throat, hoping to express gratitude or ask more, but remembered the rule. Instead, she lifted the napkin, showing it briefly to the cook. He gave a curt nod and turned back to his soup, stirring it with deliberate strokes. As she retreated from the kitchen, her mind raced. Not evil, just broken. The phrase bounced around in her thoughts. It explained everything and nothing at once. Daimeji's coldness, his rules, his constant emotional distance, they might spring from some deep wound. Even in her village, she had seen kind men turn harsh after traumas like losing a loved one or being betrayed. Over the next few days, Tari began leaving little notes of her own, small messages slipped behind pantry doors or under plates, hoping the cook would find them. She wrote questions: why is he broken? What hurts him? But she never received answers. One evening, however, when she pulled back her napkin at dinner, she found a single word scrawled in the corner: Lami. She stared at it, puzzled. Lami? Was that a person? A memory? A puzzle piece? She felt a swirling confusion in her chest. If Lami was connected to Daimeji's past, it might explain the pain behind his controlling facade. But how would she uncover more without risking herself? Clutching the note, she resolved to tread cautiously. She was under strict rules, but that wouldn't stop her from seeking answers. If Daimeji wasn't evil but broken, then perhaps, just perhaps, there was a chance for her to mend those cracks. Or at least understand them. Late that night, a fierce thunderstorm battered the mansion. Winds howled outside, and rain pelted the windows like tiny fists demanding entry. Tari jolted awake to a sharp cracking sound. At first, she thought lightning had struck the house, but when she turned on the bedside lamp, she saw glass shards scattered across the floor. She sat up in horror to find that her large mirror had shattered. A jagged web of cracks ran through the gilded frame, and pieces of the mirror lay everywhere, shining in the flickering light. She stepped gingerly among the shards, searching for some reason behind this sudden destruction. Had lightning's vibrations caused it? Or was this some strange omen? Her heart hammered as she remembered all the words she'd crossed out or scribbled over on that mirror. The rule sheet was now ruined, too. In the chaotic reflection of the broken glass, she saw how her carefully etched lines had come undone. It was as though the storm had punctuated her silent rebellion with a final, dramatic flourish. Suddenly, the door to her room burst open. Daimeji stood there, his eyes flashing with an intensity she hadn't seen before. His chest heaved, water dripping from his hair and shoulders. He must have rushed inside from somewhere in the mansion, perhaps after hearing the crash. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Their eyes locked. Then, as if the tension in the air were too thick to bear, Daimeji bent down, gently picking up a large shard of broken glass. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his tone surprisingly soft. Tari shook her head, unable to form words. She braced herself for a scolding about the rules or for some harsh remark about being careless. Instead, Daimeji placed the shard on the dresser, walked over to the bed, and slowly draped a silk scarf over her shoulders. His eyes flickered with an emotion that looked almost like concern, but he quickly looked away. He cleared his throat. "I'll send someone to clean this up." "Rest now," he said, turning to leave. There was no lecture, no punishment. Just a silent exit. In the corridor, a flash of lightning revealed him pausing, as though something more was on his mind. But he said nothing more and disappeared. Tari sat on the edge of the bed, holding the scarf, her pulse pounding. She could still hear the storm raging outside, but within her, a different storm brewed, a storm of possibilities. Maybe the man behind the harsh rules wasn't as unfeeling as she thought. Maybe the cracks were beginning to show. The next morning, Tari woke to the subdued hum of workers replacing her shattered mirror. She chose to stay out of the way, venturing into parts of the mansion she had never explored. Curiosity led her up a narrow, dusty staircase she had found hidden near the back of a linen closet. The steps creaked with each careful footfall as she climbed higher. At the top, she discovered a cramped attic filled with old trunks, weathered boxes, and sheet-covered furniture. Motes of dust swirled in the sunlight slicing through a small window. Tari carefully navigated the clutter, stopping when something glinted at her feet, a small, decorative box carved with geometric patterns. She opened it, her heart skipping when she found an old letter addressed to L. The handwriting was undeniably Daimeji's, though it looked younger, less certain. Her eyes darted around, making sure she was alone. Then she carefully unfolded the letter. The ink had faded, and some of the words were smudged, but she could piece together fragments. "I still see your face when I close my eyes. I blame myself for everything. Can't forgive me, but can't forget you. Wish I could turn back time. Tari's breath caught in her throat. The tender regret in the letter was in stark contrast to the cold, distant man she knew. Whoever Elle was, they had once possessed Daimeji's heart, and something terrible must have happened to shatter the connection. She gently folded the letter and placed it back in the box, mind racing. Lami, the name from the cook's note. Could Lami be the one he had written to? If so, the heartbreak must run deep. Perhaps this was the reason Daimeji had built walls around himself, imposing strict rules to shield what was left of his fragile heart. As she descended the attic stairs, she felt a mixture of dread and empathy. She realized she had stumbled upon a deeply personal piece of Daimeji's past. It was knowledge that could become her weapon or her curse. She had to tread carefully. But a part of her, the part that believed in healing and understanding, wanted to piece together the fragments of this letter, and possibly, the fragments of the man who had written it. That evening, Tari found herself seated at the far end of a long dining table, opposite Daimeji. Usually, their dinners were silent affairs, the clink of silverware echoing in the massive room. The staff would serve, then retreat, leaving the newlyweds in an oppressive hush. But tonight, something stirred within Tari. She couldn't pretend anymore. The letter in the attic weighed on her mind. She had found evidence of a man once capable of deep love and sorrow. Her curiosity demanded she reach out. The dining table flickered under soft chandelier light, reflecting off polished cutlery. Daimeji was checking his phone, barely touching his food. A swirl of courage rushed through Tari. She spoke, breaking the first rule with a careful, gentle voice. Daimeji, did you? His head snapped up, eyes narrowing. For a heartbeat, he looked furious. Her breath caught in her throat, certain she had finally done it, broken his precious rule and earned his wrath. But then, just as quickly, she saw something else in his gaze, something that looked suspiciously like relief that she was speaking at all. Don't do that again, he said, his voice stiff. Yet there was no anger in it, just tension. They locked eyes, the air thick with unspoken words. She swallowed, her hand trembling around her fork. She wanted to talk about the letter, about Lami, about anything that might crack his chilly exterior. But she weighed the risk. This was the first time she had openly defied him. I'm sorry, she whispered, voice shaking. But I needed to know if you're all right. His jaw clenched, and he pressed his napkin to his lips. Don't ask me questions. He stood abruptly, leaving his plate untouched. This conversation is over. He left the room, footsteps echoing on the marble floor. Tari remained at the table, her heart pounding, unsure if she had just triggered a raging storm, or laid the first stepping stone toward bridging the chasm between them. The staff peeked in anxiously, as though expecting an outburst, but none came. Despite his brusque rejection, Tari felt a fleeting sense of victory. She had spoken. She had broken the first rule. And the world had not ended. Somewhere inside, she dared to hope that perhaps it was a beginning, an opening crack in the fortress that was Daimeji's heart. The next morning, Tari received an unexpected visitor, Ma Abani, Daimeji's formidable grandmother. She arrived in a stately car, wearing a richly patterned outfit that commanded attention. The staff seemed to quake in her presence. Even Daimeji, who rarely showed respect to anyone, bowed his head when she walked in. Ma Abani gestured for Tari to follow her into the drawing room, a lavish space filled with velvet drapes and antique chairs. Sit with me, she commanded, her tone softer than Tari expected. Tari perched on the edge of a chair, keeping her gaze lowered respectfully. The older woman regarded her with a calculating expression. My grandson is complicated, Ma Abani began, toying with the large rings on her fingers. I chose you because I saw a quiet strength. A girl from the village, but with eyes that see more than they reveal. Tari's pulse quickened. She had never heard the matriarch speak so directly. I don't know what you mean, she managed, struggling to keep her voice steady. Ma Abani waved a dismissive hand. Child, I have survived a man just like him, his grandfather. You think your husband's rules are stringent? His grandfather's rules were iron, sealed tight. I learned to bend them, not break them outright. That is how I survived. She leaned forward, voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Every rule he gives you, you must find a way around it, a way to bend and reshape until they become your own. Understand? A shiver ran down Tari's spine. The old woman's words were both cautionary and empowering. It felt like a passing of ancestral knowledge, an inheritance of defiance wrapped in wisdom. How? Tari asked. I'm just one person here, with so much to lose. Ma Abeni's eyes gleamed. You have everything to gain. This house, it is not just bricks and walls. It has a voice. Listen to it carefully. If you do, you'll find your power. And maybe, just maybe, you'll find how to free him from his chains too. She rose gracefully, patting Tari's hand. I won't stay long. My presence agitates Daimeji. But remember what I said, child. Bend the rules. Survive. And don't let him bury you under his pain. With that, she swept out of the room, leaving Tari more determined and more confused than ever. Ma Abeni's cryptic advice resonated in her mind, the voice of the house. Maybe the silent halls and locked doors had stories to tell. If she listened closely, she might discover how to break Daimeji's chains without being crushed in the process. Sitting alone in her room, Tari dialed a number on a phone she had managed to borrow briefly from the cook. She had to be quick, the staff were nervous about letting her use any communication device. But her cousin Muna's voice on the other end was a welcome beacon of relief. Tari? Is that you? Muna's voice rang through with concern. Goodness, I've been worried sick. Are you okay over there? Tari exhaled, tears stinging her eyes at the sound of a familiar voice. I'm surviving, she admitted. He has these rules, Muna. I broke one. I spoke to him when he didn't ask me to. Muna let out a low hiss. So what happened? Did he lock you in a closet or something? No, not exactly. He just told me not to do it again. But I saw something in his eyes. Muna's voice softened. Tari, you're not a statue. You're a sword. Start cutting. If you keep tiptoeing around him, he'll never respect you. Tari swallowed. I can't just confront him outright, Muna. There's so much I don't know. I found a letter about someone named Lami. Something happened to her. I think it's why he's so guarded. Muna was quiet a moment. Hurt people, hurt people. Maybe if you can find out more, you can free him from whatever ghost he's carrying. But if it gets too heavy, promise me you'll find a way out. Tari's grip tightened on the phone. I'll try. There's no easy way to leave, not under these rules. But maybe if I gather enough leverage, I can negotiate my own freedom. Muna's tone turned serious. Girl, I have some savings. I can help you run if it comes to that. Don't let him break you. Remember, you are from strong stock. A lioness does not cower forever. Tari nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. Thank you, Muna. A quick shuffle outside the door alerted her to a staff member's presence. She whispered into the receiver, I have to go. She hung up just as footsteps approached. She sat there, heart racing with the prospect of escape. But for now, she had to remain in place, biding her time, gathering her strength. Something deep inside told her that leaving without understanding the darkness behind Daimeji's rules might haunt her just as fiercely. She promised herself, she would not remain silent. She would become the sword, cutting her way to the truth. Emboldened by her call with Muna, Tari decided to test the boundaries. The second rule stated she could not leave the property without explicit permission. So she devised a plan. She waited until the guard shift changed, a narrow window when she could slip past the less vigilant sentries. That afternoon, she approached the mansion's main gate. The two guards on duty recognized her immediately. "Madam, you're not permitted to leave," one said gruffly. "We have our orders." Tari feigned surprise. "I have a message from Ma Abani," she lied smoothly, her voice calm and authoritative. "She asked me to deliver something personally. I have her brooch as proof." She lifted a small, ornate brooch that Ma Abani had secretly slipped into her hand during her recent visit. The matriarch had likely known it would come in handy. The guards looked at it, exchanged uncertain glances. It was, indeed, Ma Abani's brooch. Nobody disobeyed the matriarch, not even Daimeji's staff. Reluctantly, they stepped aside, allowing Tari to exit. Heart pounding, she passed through the gates onto the quiet street. The moment felt surreal, her first taste of freedom since marrying into this silent prison. She took a moment to savor the breeze that rustled her hair. It felt like a personal victory, a crack in the wall that had confined her. She flagged down a passing taxi and instructed the driver to take her to the nearest bookstore she could find. Along the ride, the city blurred by her window, streets filled with noise, color, life. It was a welcome contrast to the sterile hush of the mansion. Once at the bookstore, Tari walked inside, immediately drawn to the shelves like a moth to a flame. She roamed until she found a single, slim volume that caught her eye, The Art of War. She smiled to herself. War. That was precisely what she was waging in that mansion, a war of wits and hearts. She paid for the book, tucking it under her arm like a secret weapon. Stepping outside, she hailed another taxi and headed back, aware that her window of opportunity was narrowing. When she returned to the gate, the same guards let her in without question, though they looked uneasy. Wordless, she smiled in thanks and walked straight into the house. She could feel eyes on her, staff members staring with shock at her boldness. But it was Daimeji she braced herself to face. Sure enough, he stood in the foyer, arms crossed over his chest, his gaze a storm of disapproval. "What are you trying to prove, Tari?" he asked, voice low and tense. She lifted her chin, meeting his stare. "I had to get something," she answered simply, not volunteering any more information. His eyes flicked to the small paper bag in her hand, but he said nothing further. For a moment, she thought she saw the faintest trace of grudging respect in his gaze. Then he turned on his heel and walked away, leaving Tari with her heart thrumming. She had shattered the second rule and lived to tell the tale. Part of her thrilled at the victory, but she also knew there might be repercussions. Yet any fear was tempered by the knowledge that the world had not ended when she claimed a piece of her freedom. Rumors spread through the house. The staff whispered about the girl who walked, marveling that she had dared to leave without Daimeji's approval. Some said it was a sign of recklessness, others admired her bravery. But Tari paid them little mind. She was too focused on her next move. Late in the evening, after her bold outing, she retreated to her room and opened The Art of War. By a dim bedside lamp, she read line after line of strategy, deception, and the power of understanding one's enemy. Though the text was about warfare, she saw parallels everywhere, manipulating environment, picking the right moment to strike, using knowledge of an opponent's weakness to your advantage. She studied the lines, "If you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles." The words rang in her ears like a mantra. She wondered if she truly knew herself. And more importantly, if she knew Daimeji. If he was not just her husband but also her adversary, then it was time to gather her arsenal of knowledge. Determined, she made a list in the notebook she had taken from the library. 1. Daimeji's third room, must find what he does at 10 p.m. 2. Lami, who is she? Where does she fit into his past? 3. East Wing, the locked door. The violin music. Why? Tari sighed, closing her notebook. The wind outside was calm tonight, as though nature itself was taking a respite. Even so, she knew storms always returned. She would be ready. For too long she had been silent, accepting her new life like a voiceless doll. But now, she was learning. She was preparing. She stood and walked to where her old mirror had been. The new one gleamed, unmarked by any rebellious scribbles. Though she no longer had the physical reminder of the rules, her spirit carried them, along with the knowledge that two had already been broken. Reaching out, she touched the cold glass, remembering her vow. "I will walk," she whispered, a gentle echo in the still night air. "I will speak. I will find out who you really are, Daimiji. And who I can be, too." Soon after, fate handed Tari another chance to break a rule. She discovered that the east wing door was mysteriously left ajar one afternoon. She couldn't tell if it was an oversight or an unspoken invitation, but she couldn't let the opportunity slip. She slipped in quietly, each step on the polished floor feeling like a tiny betrayal. The hallway here was different, darker, the windows shrouded by thick velvet curtains. Light from wall sconces cast a gilded glow on the ornate wallpaper. She followed the faint echo of violin music, though it sounded more like a distant memory now, as if the notes lingered in the air from some past performance. Eventually, she reached a small gallery, the walls lined with portraits. One painting in particular seized her attention, a portrait of a young woman with features strikingly similar to Tari's. The woman wore a delicate white dress, her face radiant with a half-smile that seemed tinged with sadness. The nameplate read, Lami. Tari's heart hammered. So this was the face of the woman who haunted Daimeji's past. And the resemblance to Tari was uncanny, enough to explain why Daimeji's grandmother might have handpicked Tari. Footsteps sounded behind her. She spun around to find Daimeji standing in the doorway, his face drawn tight with shock and anger. For a moment, neither moved. His eyes darted to the portrait, then back to Tari, as if comparing them. "How dare you come here?" he murmured, fists clenched at his sides. Tari drew in a breath. She refused to be meek. "I heard music once, from here. I had to know what it was." His face twisted, torn between rage and something else, grief, perhaps. Then, to her surprise, tears glistened in his eyes. He quickly turned away, as though ashamed of showing any vulnerability. "Get out," he choked, his voice hoarse. "Before I do something I might regret." She stood there for a moment, warring with the urge to comfort him, to ask who Lami was and why she bore such a likeness. But she heeded his warning, quietly exiting the east wing, leaving behind a swirl of unspoken questions and raw emotion. The locked door slammed shut behind her, sealing away a chapter of Daimeji's past that she now understood was heartbreakingly real. The next night, Tari paced in her bedroom, uncertain whether Daimeji would come to confront her or continue to ice her out. To her surprise, the door creaked open. He stepped in, his expression unreadable. She braced herself, half expecting him to lash out for her trespass. But instead, he closed the door softly and leaned against it, as if the weight of the world pressed on his shoulders. "You saw her," he said, his voice hollow. "Lami." Tari nodded, her voice gentle. "Yes." He gestured for her to sit, then he lowered himself onto an armchair. For a long moment, he stared at his hands, clasped tightly in his lap. "She was everything to me. My first real love. The only person who ever understood my mind. Or so I thought." Tari's heart ached. She urged him on, "What happened?" He swallowed, gaze distant. "I had rules. So many rules. I kept pushing her away, telling her how to speak, how to dress, how to live, because I was terrified of losing her. But in trying to control her every move, I crushed her spirit." His voice cracked with guilt. "One day, she left. I thought she'd come back. Instead, I got the news that she took her own life. And I blamed myself." Tari felt tears burning her eyes. She moved closer, wanting to offer some sort of comfort. "I'm so sorry. That must have been devastating." He gave a mirthless laugh. Devastating doesn't even begin to cover it. I locked my heart away, surrounded myself with rules to protect myself from feeling that kind of pain again. When my grandmother insisted I marry, I insisted on having everything spelled out, no closeness, no real love. Just structure. But then, you reminded me of Lami the moment I saw your picture. I resented you for it, but also, I couldn't stop thinking about the possibility of redemption. Maybe I could do better this time. Emotions warred within Tari, anger at his suffocating rules, pity for his guilt, and a strange flutter of hope that maybe, just maybe, he was capable of change. Daimeji, He held up a hand, rising to his feet. I don't deserve your pity. I only told you because I can't bear this charade anymore. If you hate me, I understand. And if you choose to leave, I won't stop you. With that, he stepped out, leaving Tari's mind reeling. She had finally cracked open his guarded past. The revelation of Lami's tragic end explained his fear, his controlling nature. The question now was, where did they go from here? Could she stay in this house, where sorrow and guilt lingered like ghosts, and help him heal? Or was this her moment to escape? She didn't have an answer yet, but she could feel fate tugging at her, urging her to confront the truth she had uncovered. The next day, Tari made her decision. She took the once-typed rule sheet, now tattered, with scribbles all over it, and walked to the fireplace in the main living room. The staff paused in their duties, watching silently as she knelt down. Her hands trembled, but her heart felt resolute. One flick of a lighter, and the edges of the paper caught fire. Daimeji entered the room at that moment, stopping short when he saw the flames licking across the rules he had penned. He didn't speak, didn't try to stop her. His eyes were dark with emotion, flickering like the fire itself. Tari stood, her voice firm. I won't live under these rules anymore. He stared at the burning paper, the final line, no entering the East Wing under any circumstances, curling into ash. Something in his expression changed, relief maybe, or a kind of painful catharsis. He stepped forward, taking the half-burnt sheet from her. Together, they watched it crumble into ash in the fireplace. When it was done, only a few blackened fragments remained, swirling in the heat. For a long moment, silence reigned. Then, in a hushed tone, Daimeji said, "Thank you." Tari turned to him, surprised. For what? He exhaled slowly. For doing what I couldn't. It's time to bury the past with Lami, and bury these chains I put on us. I just didn't know how. Emotions welled up in Tari, tears threatening to spill. She placed a tentative hand on his arm. It's all right. You're not alone now. But I need my freedom, Daimeji. I can't live like a captive. He nodded, swallowing. I understand. He stepped back, turning to the staff, who were still hovering. His voice was firm yet gentle. No one is to stop her from coming or going. Understood? There was a collective exhalation, a sense that the entire mansion took a breath of fresh air. Tari felt lightheaded, as though she had just released herself from a prison. She stared at him, uncertain if this was the beginning of a new era or just another fragile moment. But for the first time, she saw a glimmer of hope flicker between them. That same evening, a knock on Tari's bedroom door made her heart jump. She opened it to find Daimeji standing in the corridor, holding a small piece of paper. He offered it to her, head bowed slightly, as though awaiting judgment. She took it, reading the words written in shaky handwriting. You are free to leave. Or stay as my equal. The phrase soared straight to her heart. It was a far cry from the stifling mandates he used to impose. She stared up at him, her eyes brimming with questions. Daimeji, this is a new rule? He gave a small, uncertain nod. Yes. A rule that sets you free. I realize how empty and broken I've been, so consumed by guilt and control. But if you see any good left in me, stay. Not as a prisoner, but as a partner. An equal. Tari's hand shook, clutching the piece of paper. She stepped aside, inviting him into the room. Together, they sat on the edge of her bed, tension crackling in the air. What if I choose to leave? She asked carefully, wanting to gauge his reaction. His shoulders slumped. I'd accept it. I don't want another Lami situation, where I push someone to the brink. If I have to lose you in order to stop hurting you, then that's what I'll do. His vulnerability struck her, and she felt tears slip down her cheeks unbidden. This was a man teetering between redemption and despair, relying on her choice for direction. She remembered Muna's words, "You're not a statue. You're a sword." But maybe she could also be a shield, offering protection and comfort for a man who had battered himself with regrets. She took his hand gently. "I'm not leaving," she whispered. "But I stay on my terms. I won't be your possession. I won't be caged." His eyes glimmered with relief and the first genuine hint of hope she had seen from him. "Then stay," he said quietly, "and we'll rebuild this house together." Tari nodded, gripping his hand. It was the moment that signaled the end of tyranny and the start of a tentative alliance. The old rules had been burned. Now, a single new rule stood, a rule of freedom and equality, shaky but sincere. The next morning, Tari summoned every ounce of boldness and announced her plan at the breakfast table. Daisi, somewhat taken aback by her new assertive demeanor, listened carefully, as did the curious staff. "I want to rebuild this house," Tari declared. "Starting with the east wing. That locked door, that hallway. I want to transform it into a place of healing, especially for women." A stunned silence followed. Daisi furrowed his brow. "You want to bring outsiders here? Have them, what exactly? Talk? Read? Heal from what?" Tari straightened, her voice unwavering. "From sorrow. From heartbreak. From life's burdens, big and small. I grew up seeing women in the village who had nowhere to go when they were hurt or lost. I want to create a space for them to learn, share, and heal. And I want to stock it with books, maybe even resources to help them become independent." Daisi toyed with his spoon. "Are you sure you want that here, in a place that has so many bad memories for me?" She nodded. "That's exactly why we should do it here. Turn it into something positive. A beacon for those in need. Including you, if you ever want to heal from your past." His gaze softened. "All right," he finally said. "But it will require renovations, planning, approvals. It's a lot of work." A small, determined smile curved Tari's lips. "I'm ready to do the work. All I need is your support." He glanced at his grandmother's brooch on the table, a silent reminder of Ma Abani's cunning wisdom, and sighed. "You have my support." He hesitated, then added, "and my gratitude." Tari's smile grew. There was a palpable shift in the air. The same staff that once cowered under oppressive rules now seemed eager to see what this new alliance would bring. Hope flickered in their eyes, and in Daisi's. The mansion was on the brink of transformation, mirroring the change taking place in its once cold master. Over the following weeks, Tari threw herself into the work of transforming the East Wing. Contractors bustled around, hammering away old panels, painting walls in soothing, neutral hues. Bookshelves arrived in stacks, soon filled with literature ranging from novels to self-help guides. Tari coordinated with local women's groups and therapists, even convincing a few volunteers to host free workshops. At first, Daisi kept his distance, watching silently from doorways or scanning documents in his study. But day by day, Tari noticed his stoic front unraveling. Sometimes he'd linger in the newly refurbished corridor, listening to women laugh during a reading session or softly cry during a support group meeting. He witnessed them find solace in one another, forming a fragile bond in a place that once harbored only sorrow. One afternoon, Tari found Daisi in the East Wing library, standing before Lami's portrait. She had rehung it in a place of honor, not as a shrine to tragedy but as a reminder of how crucial kindness and freedom could be. He reached out, his fingers almost brushing the painted cheek. Tari's heart clenched, she couldn't imagine the weight of his guilt. Feeling her presence, he turned. "I was just thinking. She would have liked this," he murmured. "She was always encouraging me to open my home to those in need, but I was too blinded by my own ambition." Tari moved closer, gently placing a hand on his shoulder. "It's never too late to honor her memory." He nodded, tears shining at the corners of his eyes. "Yes, I see that now." Word spread quickly about the women's reading and healing space. Social media caught wind of this surprising story, the once gold tech entrepreneur who allowed his young bride to transform his mansion into a sanctuary. Curious visitors arrived, some skeptical, some hopeful. And the mansion's energy shifted from oppressive hush to vibrant dialogue, from locked doors to open arms. Through it all, Daimeji watched Tari with a mixture of pride, admiration, and regret. He had once set rules to bind her, but now he saw her flourish without them, free and unstoppable. The fact that she remained by his side, investing in his future, felt like a gift he didn't deserve. As he saw her move gracefully among the women, offering a listening ear or a supportive hug, he understood he was witnessing something extraordinary, the rise of a woman who had every reason to run but chose to stay and build. News outlets, bloggers, and everyday people online began sharing the mansion's transformation. The girl who rewrote the rules, they called Tari. Hashtags like hashtag rewrite the rules, hashtag new beginnings, and hashtag healing home started trending. People marveled at how the strict, reclusive Daimeji had not only opened his mansion's doors but also his heart. Reporters clamored for interviews, and offers for collaboration poured in from NGOs and charities. For the first time in a long while, Daimeji was smiling, openly, genuinely. He took Tari's hand as they strolled through the refurbished East Wing, greeting visitors and volunteers. One day, as a journalist snapped photos for a feature story, she captured a candid moment of Daimeji laughing with Tari. The image went viral. In it, he wasn't the stern mogul, nor she the timid village bride. They were partners, equals, bound by respect instead of rules. Comments flooded the internet. He set rules to control her, but she set them on fire. This is the kind of love story we need: growth, healing, redemption. Tari is everything. A queen who conquered a kingdom with kindness. Ma Abani, now a proud spectator, commented wryly, "They didn't listen to me when I said the house had a voice. Now, everyone can hear it sing." Tari, for her part, found herself both humbled and exhilarated by the attention. She had never aimed to be a public figure, yet she couldn't deny the impact of her work. Women of different backgrounds came forward to share stories of how they, too, were trapped by invisible chains, strict families, controlling partners, or their own fears. Seeing Tari stand tall gave them hope, a validation that they could also rewrite their destinies. And what of Daimeji? Each day, he took another step away from his past. He quietly visited the support groups, sometimes sharing glimpses of his own mistakes. He set up a scholarship fund in Lami's name for underprivileged girls, hoping to honor her memory rather than bury it under guilt. Every time he caught Tari's eye across a crowded room, he felt a wave of gratitude. He had once believed love was control, that fear of losing someone justified commanding their every breath. Now, he understood that love was letting someone breathe, trusting them to remain by choice, not by force. In the end, the old rules didn't vanish. They became legends, cautionary tales of how fragile hearts can break when bound by fear, and how they can mend when freed by compassion. Tari and Daimeji's story spread far beyond the mansion walls, reminding the world that redemption was always possible, even when mistakes seemed unforgivable. Through vulnerability, empathy, and sheer will, they forged a bond that outlasted any set of rules. Standing on the balcony one sunlit afternoon, Tari gazed at the endless sky. Her phone buzzed with messages from strangers thanking her for inspiring them to challenge their own limitations. She turned to see Daimeji approaching, an open smile on his face. For a moment, they just looked at each other, no words, no constraints. Just two souls who had navigated pain, discovered hope, and chosen each other on equal terms. Yes, she thought, eyes drifting to the horizon. She was free. And so was he. The end.